I want to welcome you to Thrive in the Word. We're continuing our study through the book of 2 Peter, and today we're in the second chapter, verse number 17. Now, Peter is writing his very last letter to the people that he loves so dearly, the Jewish people. Many of these people were part of his church in Jerusalem, and because of persecution, they fled to other parts of the known world at that time. And Peter, we just see so much of his compassion for these people that he's writing to them, and they believe that within a month after he finished writing this letter, that Peter was executed there in Rome. And you know, when a person is writing their last letter, it becomes a very, very important thing. And you know that Peter spent almost half of this letter talking about false prophets and false teachers. And I believe personally that this is very pertinent for us today. I believe that we need to be warned of false prophets and false teachers. I believe that the Bible teaches that in the last days that we would see a rise of false prophets and false teachers. And I know that we've said this before, but this is something that you need to really understand. If the devil can't stop you from doing the will of God, he will try to pervert you in doing the will of God. He will try to mislead you. Why? Because he does not want you to be effective in this world. He does not want you to shed the light. He does not want you to be the salt of the earth. And so he'll send false prophets and false teachers to make sure that your life is ineffective. And so now we're looking again at verse number 17, and this is what it says. These are springs without water and mists driven by a storm, for whom the black darkness has been reserved. Now this is a very cruel description of false prophets and false teachers. What does he say? He says they are like springs without water. Now, let me just clarify this or help you to understand this. Have you ever been thirsty and you're just looking for a drink? And then you go up to a water fountain and all of a sudden you see the sign on the water fountain, out of order. It's dry. Well, for Peter, he's using this description, and he says these false teachers and false prophets, they look like a spring, but all they are is a hole in the ground. There's no water in them. There's no benefit to them, and so they look good on the outside. They look promising on the outside, but there's nothing in them. And then he goes on and he says they're like mists driven by a storm. Now, the King James actually said they are like clouds without rain. Have you ever been in need of rain? Here in West Michigan, we are needing rain very desperately right now. But you know what? Sometimes clouds come over and it looks promising. Sometimes we watch the radar and we say, oh, there's clouds coming, there's a storm coming, and then it would just fall apart. Well, that's the same idea that Peter is giving to us here. He's saying these false teachers and these false prophets, they look promising. Everything looks good, but there's no substance to them. Nothing that they say will help you. Nothing that they say will make you more effective. And then he goes on and he says this, for whom the black darkness has been reserved. What's he saying? He's saying these guys are reserved for the black darkness. Not just darkness. He becomes very descriptive here. He says it's the black darkness. There is no light in them. There's no light in them whatsoever. How many of you know that we as believers, we need the light of Jesus so that we can share the light of the gospel with others? But he's saying these guys, they are totally dark. I remember being in Mammoth Cave, and there's a place where when they take you down into the cave, and the guide will shut all the lights off. You can't even see your hand in front of your face. It is total darkness. And that's what Peter is talking about. Their lives, there's no light in them whatsoever. That's total darkness. And then Peter goes on into verse number 18. He says, for speaking out arrogant words of vanity, they entice by fleshly desires, by sensuality, those who are barely escaping from the ones who live in error. What's he saying? He's saying, now this is how they talk. This is what they say. These are the words that they say. And he says they are speaking arrogant words out of vanity. Arrogant words. In other words, these are words that are arrogant, words that are meant to enhance your opinion of them. These are words that are just words that are just trying to get you to be impressed with them. But notice what Peter says. These are arrogant words, but they are words in vanity. Now, what does the word vanity mean? It's not a word that we use very much in the English language in these days, but what does it mean? It means just basically emptiness. Their words, even though they're puffed up, even though they look large on the outside, their words have nothing to them. They make no difference. And so when you hear a man and you hear all of this arrogant speech, you need to ask yourself, are those words of any profit to me? Will they change my life? Will they change other people's lives? And then Peter goes on and he says these words. He says, they entice by fleshly desires. What's he talking about? He's saying that these arrogant words are words that entice, that they entice by fleshly desires. In other words, these arrogant words are meant for people who are struggling with fleshly desires. How many of you know fleshly desires are not just desires for food and sex and things like that? Fleshly or carnal desires can be things like an or a lust for knowledge, a lust for popularity. And what do these words do? They are meant to go out to people who are desiring fleshly things. And then he says, by sensuality, those who barely escape the ones who live in error. These words are targeted for believers that are not mature in their faith. They're targeted for believers that are still bound by certain fleshly desires. And again, I say this as we bring this podcast to a close. These words are meant to deceive. These words are meant to bring you to a point where you are not effective. And these words are meant to destroy the spiritual maturity of these believers who are not yet mature in their faith. I hope that this has blessed you today. May God bless you until we speak to you again.